Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with chicken spaghetti. That's right, I am very excited to show you my take on this delicious pasta dish, which should not be confused with a certain casserole that goes by the same name, and I believe features a can of condensed soup. But what this version lacks in hard to pronounce and possibly dangerous ingredients, it more than makes up for by being super easy, extremely comforting, and of course very, very tasty. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by transferring a big old chicken into a pot. And actually, it doesn't really have to be old, but it should be big. This chicken right here went about 4.5 pounds. And then to this, what we'll do is add one 24-ounce jar of the finest store-bought marinara sauce, or of course the same amount of homemade. And then in addition to that, we'll add twice as much water as we do sauce, which is going to be very easy to measure if you did use a jarred sauce. So we'll go ahead and fill that up with nice cold fresh water and give it a little shake to rinse out any of the sauce left inside. And then repeat that one more time with another jar of nice cold fresh water. And then before we head to the stove, we will add one more semi-secret ingredient. And that would be 2 fillets of anchovy, or as we sometimes refer to it around here, Italian MSG. And if you're nervous about that, don't be. You're not going to be able to taste it. This is really only going to affect the taste if you don't put it in. And then what we'll do is head to the stove and bring this up to a simmer on high heat. And yes, it's totally fine the chicken is not covered in liquid. All right, as long as you're coming up to about the kneecaps, you should be in good shape. Since we are going to cook this covered, that meat's going to get cooked through no problem. But anyway, like I said, we will bring this up to a simmer, at which point we will back the heat down to medium-low, cover this, and simmer it exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes. And during that time, what I want you to do is absolutely nothing. Don't take off the lid, don't stir it, don't turn it, do nothing. Except maybe possibly watch it simmer through the glass. And after simmering for exactly 65 minutes, this is what mine looked like. And then what we'll do at this point is very, very carefully grab some tongs and carefully transfer this into a large bowl to cool. And I know it does already look delicious. So we'll go ahead and very carefully remove our chicken from our cooking liquid. And we'll simply let it sit in that bowl cooling off until we can pull that chicken meat off the bones without burning ourselves. And what we'll do while we're waiting for that to happen is crank our heat up to medium-high because we're going to want to reduce this sauce. Or actually, I should say we want to reduce this liquid to make a sauce. And I'll say we want to reduce this by at least half, but it's probably going to be a little more than that. Okay, we want to sort of boil this down until it starts to thicken up a little. And of course, anytime we're reducing something like this that had meat in it, we're almost always going to have some fat floating on the top, which you can certainly spoon off if you so choose. And I usually do remove most of it, especially since I'm going to throw a little bit of butter in here later. But anyway, we'll go ahead and let that reduce. And while we're keeping an eye on that, waiting for it to reduce to the perfect thickness, we should have just enough time to do our chicken. So assuming this is cool enough to touch, what we'll do is touch it. And by touch, I mean tear. So we'll go ahead and remove that meat from the bone and pull off the skin and any other non-meat connective tissue. And we will transfer that into a bowl, breaking it up into as small pieces as we want as we go. And as you can see, I do like to leave this in some fairly big pieces. And while I'm happy to spend a few minutes trying to pick out every last scrap of meat, I'm not going to go too nuts because I am going to make a stock out of this. And of course, it goes without saying that if you get any accumulated juices in this bowl, you will be required to strain those back into your sauce pot. Which, now that our chicken's been picked, we should probably go back and check. And for me, at least this time, this is about how far I'm going to reduce it. Okay, it's just starting to thicken up a little. And then regardless of how thick or thin we want this mixture to be, once it reaches our desired viscosity, we will reduce the heat to low, and we will go ahead and add all our beautifully poached chicken back in, along with a little bit of red chili flake to heat things up. And because we're using this, we don't need any cayenne. That's basically cayenne pepper in flake form. And then we'll also toss in a nice big pinch of salt. And we'll stir all that together. And as soon as that chicken heats through, and we're happy with how this tastes, we're done. So we'll go ahead and give the sauce a taste and check for salt and other seasoning. And while we're at it, we'll also taste a piece of chicken to double check. And that's it, assuming it's looking and tasting exactly how we want. We'll simply keep that on low heat while we go ahead and cook our pasta, which for me is going to be a half pound of spaghetti, or as your kids might pronounce it, paschetti. And I'm going to go ahead and cook that in some nicely salted water for about 1 minute under the package directions. And obviously, if you want a different pasta shape, use what you want. I mean, you are, after all, the Lawrence Ferlinghetti of your chicken and spaghetti. So if you want to oogle a different noodle, feel free. But I am using the pasta that's in the name. But no matter which shape pasta we're using, once that's done, we'll go ahead and drain it and return that back to the stove and place it over low heat. And we'll go ahead and ladle in as much chicken and sauce as we see fit. And by the way, I mentioned I'm doing 8 ounces of pasta. But this sauce recipe will make enough for about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of pasta. And then besides our sauce, we're also going to go ahead and grate in some cheese, which can be Parmigiano Reggiano, but this time I'm using Pecorino, which for whatever reason I think pairs a little better with this. And then after the cheese, what we'll do is go sauce segredo on this thing by adding a chiffonata basil, plus a couple tablespoons of butter. So yes, you are allowed to steal ideas from your own videos that you stole from other people's recipes. Totally legal. And we'll go ahead and stir all that together over a low heat for about a minute or until the butter melts. And while we're doing this, our pasta is going to be absorbing all that goodness from the sauce. Which is why, by the way, we never want to dump cooked pasta in a bowl and then just ladle the sauce over the top. Okay, as science has proven, that's just not going to be as good. And then what we'll do as soon as that butter's melted is turn off the heat. And then we'll grate in one more addition of cheese before performing the old cover and wait. All right, so what we're going to do with the heat off is stir in that cheese. And then we're going to cover this and let it sit for 1 minute. And for me, that's 60 seconds well spent. And that's it. After a minute, we'll uncover it and give it one last stir. And assuming we're happy with how it's tasting, we'll go ahead and serve that up, which as usual, we will do in a warm bowl. And we'll make sure we're getting plenty of chicken, as well as that simple but gorgeous sauce. And maybe we'll top that with a little more cheese and maybe a little more basil. And that's it. What we're calling chicken spaghetti is done. So let me grab a fork and spoon and dig in. And even though this sauce is relatively light texture-wise, it is still extremely flavorful and very satisfying. So that's one reason I love this dish. And the other reason is that incredibly moist, succulent, tender chicken. Because we poached that first and then just added it back to the sauce at the end, we don't have to worry about any tough dry meat. And yes, you'll be happy to know, I eventually figured out which side of the spoon to use. Turns out the concave side is the one to twirl the pasta in. See, I'm one of these people that never reads the owner's manual. And by the way, that butter and basil we added at the end were optional. But for me, it really ties this simple pasta together. So I really did love how this came out. And it really is a beautiful alternative to your more standard meat sauces. So whether you do this for some fancy Sunday supper, or just maybe some cold rainy weeknights, I really do hope you give this easy and delicious chicken spaghetti a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.